Hello and welcome to HBM's Crypto-Corner for Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. We have a few things to talk about, so let's get started. First, we have a classic story to talk about from the 1920s about the Yeti, or Abominable Snowman if you prefer. The Abominable Snowman, a classic case from the 1920s, controversial but still intriguing. It is a fact that sightings of the mammoth abominable snowmen of the Himalayas are far less prevalent than they were in decades long gone. Indeed, there is no doubt that the 1920s was a period of a number of intriguing encounters. A perfect example of this is the story of one N.A. Tombazi, a British photographer who also happened to be a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society. It was while at a height of around 15,000 feet on the Zimu Glacier, and at a distance of around 600 to 900 feet, that Tombazi spied something profoundly weird on the slopes. He later recorded his thoughts on this 1925 affair, which make for fascinating reading. The intense glare and brightness of the snow prevented me from seeing anything for the first few seconds, but I soon spotted the object referred to about 200 to 300 yards away down the valley to the east of our camp. Unquestionably, the figure in outline was exactly like a human being, walking upright and stopping occasionally to uproot or pull at some dwarf rhododendron bushes. It showed up dark against the snow, and as far as I can make out, wore no clothes. Within the next minute or so, it had moved back into some thick scrub and was lost to view. Unfortunately, as Tombazi admitted, the brief sighting of the beast did not give him the opportunity to focus his telephoto camera on it, something that would surely have offered a far more detailed study of the creature had he been able to do so. Nevertheless, the encounter was not entirely over. A few hours later, and as Tombazi began his descent, he made a detour to where the creature was seen. Although he did not see the thing again, he did find its footprints. Back to Tombazi, I examined the footprints, which were clearly visible on the surface of the snow. They were similar in shape to those of a man, but only 6 to 7 inches long by 4 inches wide at the broadest part of the foot. The marks of 5 distinct toes and of the instep were perfectly clear, but the trace of the heel was indistinct, and the little that could be seen of it appeared to narrow down to a point. Tombazi continued with his description of the prints. I counted 15 such footprints at regular intervals, ranging from 1.5 to 2 feet. The prints were undoubtedly of a biped, the order of the spoor having no characteristics whatever of any imaginable quadruped. Dense rhododendron scrub prevented any further investigations as to the direction of the footprints, and threatening weather compelled me to resume the march. From inquiries I made a few days later at Yoksun on my return journey, I gathered that no man had gone in the direction of Jongri since the beginning of the year. John Napier, who was a noted authority on unknown apes, suggested that what Tombazi saw may have been a bear. Napier said of the tracks, the dimensions and the indistinct narrow heel print suggest as much. On the other hand, we need to keep in mind Tombazi's very own words. Yes, bears can walk on their hind legs. Tombazi's comments on what he saw, however, describe something very much unlike a bear. The figure in outline was exactly like a human being walking upright. The prints were undoubtedly of a biped, the order of the spoor having no characteristics whatever of any imaginable quadruped. Whatever N.A. Tombazi really encountered all those years ago remains the enigma to us as it did to the man himself. So this case has been written about in several Sasquatch books, and Yeti books as well. It's a pretty well-known case. I think Tombazi, even though they say he was British, I think he was actually Greek. I think Tombazi is a Greek name. But it's interesting. It's a very interesting story. What did he see? Did he see a bear? Or did he see a Yeti? It's a good question. and one, unfortunately, that we will not get an answer to anytime soon. And here's something interesting, a sighting of the Loch Ness Monster by a fellow named Richard Jenkins. Apparently that must be his sketch of what he saw. What Richard Jenkins saw on a windy morning just under 50 years ago has become one of the classic Loch Ness Monster sightings, appearing in various of the top books at the time. Let us start with the account of Richard Jenkins' sighting taken from Rip's Nest Letter number 3, dated May 1974. Number 3. I can now include the very good sighting had by Mr. Richard Jenkins from the shoreline of his property at Point Clare. The date was Saturday, November 10th, and the time 11:45 approximately. The weather was stormy with a strong wind blowing from the northwest, but in spite of this quite large rollers were coming into the shore. Say 18 inches to 2 feet in height, but they were not in the form of white horses or breakers. My site was a small clearing in the woodland about 20 yards from the shore and about 20 feet above the level of the loch. I was starting a reluctant tractor, and in order to do this, it had been found necessary to remove the silencer. The tractor started with a roar, much black smoke, etc., and almost immediately afterwards I heard a very large splash, as if someone had gone in from the very high end, from the high board, very flat, and all this over the noise of the gale rushing through the bushes on the tractor. I got off the tractor and went to look at the loch, but could see nothing, so after a few moments returned to the tractor. I then took a further glance and saw a ring of concentric expanding ripples in the waves just out from the end of the new jetty which we are constructing. Nothing further, so back to the tractor. A few moments later I glanced again towards the loch, and there, nicely framed by a curved overhanging bough, a fish-like object at first, started to appear quite slowly and steadily until it was about 18 inches above the water surface. It then seemed to pause, but on reflection I think that this may have been a wet wave rising up over the neck, and then came up about another 2 feet or so. It then seemed to stay quite motionless for a short time, very hard to say how long, as I was flabbergasted. It was leaning slightly forward, and my view was that of a profile. It then moved slowly forward towards the easterly end of the loch and parallel to the shore, and slowly sinking from the base upwards, but not splashing forward or porpoising, etc. It moved about 40 yards or so out of the framework of the bow, and I walked forward to see it finally sink out of sight. Now, for the first time, I realized that I had probably seen the beastie, and I became rather bewildered, and it has taken me some time to rationalize my sighting. Now, for description, I am sorry that I cannot draw. Color black or browny gray, texture neither rough nor smooth nor slimy. Matte is the best word I can think of at the moment. Diameter is, say, 9 inches. I think I should say 9 feet. No fins or gills. There appeared to be scales very large on the head, but this was only an impression. A great gash of a mouth at least 9 inches long. Now, should that be 9 feet long or 9 inches long? And tight shut, and above the center of the mouth what may have been an eye, but possibly a blowhole. Very small, it appeared to me to be about the size of a pea and pitch black. I was under the impression that the animal was well aware of my presence. When it first appeared, it was about 15 feet out of the vertical, leaning forward, but when it sank, it increased this angle to about 30 feet. I believe this is supposed to be inches, although that kind of seems kind of strange. To about 30 feet. There was no further indication of how much remained underwater, but about a week later I found a 10-pound salmon just alive with a large wound in its side against the jetty. I wonder if it had attacked this fish. The general appearance of the animal was that of a tube, slightly rounded at the top with the head profile rather like that of a lizard, snake, or frog. I saw no sign of the often mentioned horse's head. So it is time to analyze the ins and outs of this interesting report and see what we can conclude from it. As I progressed in this study, I noted the words beginning to increase at a rapid rate. The result of this was a decision to publish this as a monograph at a small price. You can see the title on the cover page below, as I have used this as a template for how to look into other such sightings. It will be published as a Kindle ebook, and I would like readers to consider it as a donation as well. After all, the previous few hundred articles have been free of charge. Some famous sightings just do not make it to this blog. You won't read about the Torquil McLeod or Arthur Grant land sightings here. They stay in the book when monsters come ashore, and so on. Enjoy the read. Remember to leave an Amazon review. Thanks. So, a very interesting sighting which happened about 50 years ago. I'm guessing it happened in 1973, possibly, because this newsletter that published it was from 1974. It said November, so I would imagine that would be 1973. So very fascinating stuff. Here's something interesting. Hopes for Tasmanian tiger resurrection bolstered by new DNA breakthrough. The possibility that the Tasmanian tiger might someday roam the earth again has seemingly taken a significant step closer to becoming a reality, as scientists have managed to decode the DNA of the creature's closest living relative. In announcing the exciting development, the research collaborative known as DNA Zoo explained that they have successfully mapped the genetic sequence for the numbat, a diminutive marsupial that boasts the same stripes as those found on the legendary thylacine. Beyond that somewhat superficial similarity, the group marveled that as much as 95% of their DNA may be identical, since they shared a common ancestor that lived sometime between 35 million and 41 million years ago. By solving the riddle of the complete numbat genome, the organization said that it could serve as a proverbial cheat sheet when it comes to determining the Tasmanian tiger's genetics as well. To that end, they noted that a 2018 project was able to produce a rudimentary first draft of the thylacine's genome, but this version is very fragmentary, due to the samples coming from old specimens held by museums. As such, the group expressed hope that the newly acquired insights regarding numbat DNA can help us fill in the missing bits of the thylacine genome, and in turn eventually pave the way for scientists to bring the extinct creature back to life. Although they conceded that such an endeavor will be more challenging than the famous bid to resurrect the woolly mammoth using DNA from the Asian elephant, the researchers expressed the optimistic opinion that decoding the numbat genome makes the thylacine's resurrection a more realistic prospect than ever before. Should the Tasmanian tiger be brought back to life, the organization indicated that the creature could easily be reintroduced to the Tasmanian bush and reclaim its place as the apex predator within that ecosystem. If and when that dream becomes reality, the group mused, thylacines would owe a debt of gratitude to their little cousin, the humble numbat. So we're talking about something something similar to Jurassic Park, bringing dinosaurs back to life. Except this is not a dinosaur. It's fascinating. Can they do it? Will they be able to do it? That's a good question. If there's further updates on this, I will certainly give them. But can they bring an extinct species back to life? Through its closest cousin? Good question. Finally, Canadian Sasquatch destination gets $1 million boost. The next time the Sasquatch is spotted in British Columbia, Canada, he might have a smile on his face. Thanks to a recent grant by the province's government, the visitor center that's home to the Sasquatch Museum in the village of Harrison Hot Springs will reportedly soon receive $1 million to put toward a new building that expands its offerings to fans of the hairy legend. Construction is expected to begin as early as summer of this year, and in a statement that's sure to generate almost as much controversy as the existence of the creature itself, a local tourism official asserted that the new attraction will make Harrison the Sasquatch capital of the world. In addition to the activities and exhibits the project brings, plans for the expansion include the museum's commitment to continue to honor the St'Salis, the area's First Nations people, known to them as Saskets. The creature has long been part of their traditional lore as a supernatural being who watches and protects their land. So this is pretty interesting. So they're going to expand this Sasquatch museum. It's going to be much larger, probably. They could put more in there, probably. Possibly. So, interesting. Very interesting. And that's going to do it for this week. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys are the heart of the show. I always say that, but I always mean it. And I'll continue to do this as long as you guys want me to. And hey, until next week, y'all be good or be good at it. This has been HBM's Crypto Corner.